So the three speakers that I brought together, I think all have something important and valuable to say on these aspects. We have John Apollos, who I'm sure most of you will know in the room, but just by way of introduction, a long-time activist at the beginning of the civic movement in Cape Town, a long-time trade unionist, and now a member of United Front. I should just note though that John speaks in personal capacity today and not representing the United Front. We have Mbuzeni Ndolozi, who is the spokesperson for the EFF. We also have Trevor Ngwani, again, someone who doesn't really need much of an introduction. Trevor Ngwani is working with me at the research chair, but again, is a long-time activist, as SEC, APF, DLF, and yeah, I'm not going to say much more. There was a bit of debate as whether history or the future should start this panel today. But I'm not going to say that your history, John, but hopefully very much part of the future. So, John, if you would like to start us off, please. I'll give you 15 minutes and then...
Amandla! Luta! Luta! Thank you, Comrade Karen. Comrades, the main topic is the issue of the prospects for the emergence of a new left within our country. Now, as Comrade Karen indicated, I'm speaking here in my personal capacity because within the United Front, there are diverse views on this particular question. So I opted to represent my own particular views on this particular question. Now, comrades, since the Marikana massacre, there are real prospects for a new left movement to emerge within our country. In fact, there are significant forces present on the left that can anchor the emergence of a new left mass movement in our country. However, there are very important strategic challenges that these forces will have to deal with in order to realize that particular prospect. And if we are unable to live up to those strategic challenges of fashioning a new left mass movement in our country, then we are in for a long, protracted period of political instability, repression, and authoritarian political rule, and emergence of strongman politics in our country. Now, why am I saying there are real prospects for a left project in our country? One, every serious progressive militant and commentator know that the Marikana massacre represented a decisive turning point in our socio-political context. And this massacre will continue to shape our future. And there are four fundamental moments that we need to take into account that has led to Marikana. The first one is the adoption of GEAR by the ANC. In fact, the adoption of GEAR, the new liberal program by the ANC, set the scene for the systemic poverty to arise within our country. The second step that led to Marikana was the emergence of new forces since 2000 that had resisted the implications and the impact of new liberalism. Here I'm referring to the thousands and thousands of community protests that have gripped our country since 2000. And even today, the statistics show that there are 12,399 protests per year in our country, still up to today, 15 years later. The third moment that led to Marikana was the victory of the Polokwane bloc under the leadership of Jacob Zuma. The fourth one that led to Marikana is the Marikana massacre itself. Now, the Marikana massacre unveiled three important things for me. One, that the post-apartheid capitalism still rests on cheap black labor. In fact, South Africa's level of poverty, level of inequality, level of misery, level of hunger demonstrate this point, that South African capitalism has not shifted away from its base, which is cheap black labor. The second important issue that the Marikana massacre unveiled was that the ANC is nothing else but the manager of capital. The link between the platinum bosses and the higher echelons of the ANC made possible the massacre on August the 16th, 2012. In fact, that massacre was a direct defense of the interest of the mining bosses in our country. In fact, the adoption of GEAR was the first dramatic instance of the ANC capitulating to the program and the interest of big capital in our country. And Marikana represented the second dramatic moment in that evolution of the ANC. And the third important thing that the Marikana massacre unveiled was that the masses in our country are no longer prepared to listen to reason. They are no longer prepared to listen to calls that they must be patient, that they must wait, that they will get a chance of a better life. There's no political institution, there's no political authority in this country that can appeal and appease the masses of our country to accept the level of deprivation, the level of poverty within our country. Now, Marikana has led to a fundamental realignment of class forces within our country. The first, it represented the end of the Congress movement, the end of the alliance as active agents of progressive change within our country. In fact, if you look at the ANC, it's nothing else, and its alliance partners, the Communist Party and COSATU, they are nothing else but the manager of discontent within our country. That's their role today in our society, and they've been playing that role since 1994, trying to manage the contradictions of apartheid capitalism that is still prevalent within our country. Marikana massacre also represented the end of the anti-apartheid democratic labor movement. In fact, the implications of Marikana came first through the labor movement within our country. We all know that Marikana led to the collapse or the disintegration of the biggest union within COSATU, the National Union of Mine Workers. In fact, even up to date, COSATU is still experiencing the ramifications of the Marikana massacre. As we can see, COSATU is disintegrating as a political force within our country. In fact, Marikana revealed the severe underlying crisis within the labor movement. It exposed the long decline in the servicing of members of trade unions. It also exposed the integration of unions within capital through the investment companies. It also demonstrated and exposed the transformation of shop stewards and organizers as functionaries of capital at the shop floor level. And lastly, it also demonstrated that the labor movement became nothing else but a conveyor belt of the ANC government. Now, it is these factors that Marikana unleashed and set the scene for the emergence of a break to the ANC. It gave rise to experiments to the left of the ANC. It gave rise to the economic freedom fighters. It gave rise to NUMSA also taking a position to break with the ANC, not to support it in the elections. In fact, Marikana created the conditions for an alignment of forces to the left of the ANC. In fact, this is what we're going to see more and more happening. More and more alignments to the left of the ANC taking place. In fact, up to Marikana, the breaks from the ANC were to the right. If you look at COPE was a split from the ANC to the right. It embraces neoliberal politics, it embraced structural adjustment, and also the United Democratic Movement, the UDM, is the one not to the right, is within the center. Now, what the realignment to the left has shown, and also the outfall with Marikana, is that our country is entering a period of sustained crisis and political flux. And there are two sources, I think that's very important to take into account for any left project to sustain itself and to find a realization. The one is that this contradiction between a democratic dispensation with an untransformed, cheap labor economy is not sustainable. It will lead from time to time to crisis. It will lead from time to time to instability, to resistance on the part of the working class. And secondly, the crisis, the ruling class, especially capital, is having a problem, because it's having a problem of a crisis of leadership. The ANC has lost its hegemony within society. The ANC can no longer be considered the authority, the political authority within the working class. And that's a problem for the ruling class. And secondly, within the ANC itself, there's a crisis of leadership. There's a crisis of quality of leadership. After they replaced Thabo Mbeki, who was the best leader for capital within the ANC, they put Zuma. Who's going to be the next one after Zuma? Cyril Ramaphosa. Will he have the political authority? Will he have the political authority? Will he have the legitimacy? Will he have the standing within the eyes of the masses to appeal to them? No, not at all. So capital has a serious problem in finding an alternative to the ANC, because the ANC's hegemony is unraveling. Now, in the context of there not being an alternative contender to the ANC, this will lead to more political instability, more crises for the ruling class within our country. And here I want to use a quote from Gramsci, just to capture this particular period, and which is important for the left to take into account in order to build this new mass movement. And Gramsci says, and I quote, "A crisis occurs, sometimes lasting for decades. This exceptional duration means incurable contradictions have revealed themselves, have reached maturity, and that despite this, the political forces which are struggling to conserve and defend the existing structure itself are making every effort to cure them within certain limits and to overcome them. These persistent efforts form the terrain of the conjunctural, and it's upon this terrain that the forces of opposition organized." So we are in a period of organic crisis. And this is very, very important because it has implications for how we construct or how we go about building a new mass movement. And I hope Jackie listens very carefully, because before this meeting she said, "I'm a very timid militant nowadays. I'm a gradualist in my perspectives." But for me, these factors are very important to take into account in fashioning a new left movement within our country. Now, the question is, are the forces of opposition up to the challenge to utilize this organic crisis to effect a fundamental shift in the relation of forces within our country? Are they up to the task to give history a fundamental push forward? That's the key question. Now, this brings me very quickly, if you just, to the present state of the forces within our country. The EFF. The EFF, with all its contradictions, does represent a significant force on the left. It has attracted and captured the imagination of a large section of the young people within our country, both unemployed, students, as well as employed people. And it's an important force that has taken up parliament, has taken up parliamentary politics, and is an important factor, an important force. However, it does have limitations. Its limitations reside in the fact that its strategy is very narrowly based on electoral politics. It has not branched out to building and assisting and contributing to the building of a unified mass movement, left mass movement within our country. Its terrain of struggle is confined to politics. It has not also dealt with the issue of democracy within the working class. It has also not dealt with the issue of cult of personality. And these are important issues that must be addressed in order to become the beacon of an alternative democratic left voice, not only within our country, but also worldwide. NUMSA is another important, significant force on the left. It has made a fundamental ideological and political break with the politics of the alliance. It represents a significant layer of workers within the workplace. However, it still has the task to translate this normative ideological break into an organic movement that captures the imagination not only of the rest of society, but more importantly of its own members. And that's very, very important for me, because at the moment, it is still looking at the world through the lenses of the 20th century. The ideological and theoretical lenses of the 20th century. It still uses those particular spectacles to deal with the current challenges. The question of the NDR, the question of revolutionary vanguard parties, those are the concepts that NUMSA is still using to deal with issues which I think are sometimes museum pieces that are no relevance or importance at this point in time in dealing with the kind of issues that we are dealing with at this particular moment. The United Front is another important and significant force on the left. It has brought together more than 290 organizations from a diverse background, from diverse sectors within our country. It is an attempt to bring about the unity between employed and unemployed organizations and movements, between the workers and also the trade unions and also community organizations. However, it has limitations which it has to overcome. And one of its first limitations to overcome is that at the moment it's a formal entity. It is not yet the entity that has deep grassroots roots. And that's a challenge that it needs to deal with in terms of the thing. Then, lastly, there are the thousands and hundreds of community organizations and social movements that exist within our country that is also a very important force on the left that needs to be harnessed, and in fundamental task that they have is the overcoming of the fragmentation and the isolation from one another as organizations. Now, just to summarize, the left needs to confront the reality of a new capitalism. Capitalism in South Africa has undergone fundamental reorganization, fundamental and profound changes. Capitalism of today is not the same as capitalism when Lenin, Trotsky was around. Capitalism has changed. Capitalism has also in our country, in addition to neoliberalism, has led to the fundamental reorganization, recomposition of the working class and the masses. In fact, there are many discontinuities in the relationships between capital and the working class, between the working class and its own organization that has brought about. That has given rise to the need for new forms of organizations, for new forms of resistance, for a new imagination to deal with the crisis that we have. Give you one example. Previously, the working class were in stable, permanent employment. Now that had very important ramifications for how it built organizations, what kind of organizations he set up, the kind of culture that is built, the kind of democracy built in terms of the working class. Now, with this casualization, labor brokering, atypical workers that are there. There's discontinuities. The working class does not have a constant groove within the workplace. Doesn't have a constant groove in relation to its own organization because of these discontinuities that exist. And therefore, this requires new forms of organizations, new forms of resistance. And unfortunately, the left in general have not come to terms with these kinds of questions. And therefore, unless we do, the working class would be unable to build sustained, democratic, mass organizations that can provide an alternative narrative, an alternative explanation, an alternative inspiration to the working class. And when that happens, when we are unable to build such kind of organizations, that means the working class will become fragmented, will rely on strongman politics, will rely on individuals for their salvation. And when that happens, we have a period of authoritarian politics, we have a period of upheavals that do not have a progressive character to it. And there are no shortcuts to the building of a new left mass movement. We have to deal, we have to rise up to those strategic challenges that this particular period throws up. Amandla. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity that we've been given to address the SASA Congress, and I'm told that the new leadership of SASA has been elected already, so we congratulate you and hope that the struggle for the transformation of sociology as a discourse, but also as a discipline, will continue. I'm not sure how relevant it is to this day, this sociology that you are still gathering to constitute. Because it looks like we have moved far beyond the traditional, sort of, disciplines of sociology, politics. I think we've traveled into a much more interdisciplinary space. And maybe the congresses that are needed are beyond sociology. Because there has to be a decolonization of theory still in South Africa, in how you understand African experiences, in how you are going to understand even how we act in parliament, the idiom with which we act and how we understand our own actions. So the conversation facilitated by old concepts that are built in Europe or in European experiences or in white experiences is still a challenge, I think, in the academy. So because we've come to a sociology gathering, we thought we must begin there. We thought we must begin there because maybe there has to be a conversation about new sociology as well, beyond the new left. On the 26th of July, 2013, the EFF was formed. It chose this day to gather because it was inspired by the 26th July movement that was led by Fidel Castro in 1955, which fought the dictatorial regime of Batista and defeated it 4 years later in 1959. When we gathered in Soweto, Uncle Tom's Hall, John was not there, so he can't talk about our democratic internal processes. He was not there, has never been to a single meeting of the EFF. A few hundred meters away from the Hector Peterson Memorial. So let's give a proper account of what has been happening with the EFF. We gathered in a gathering that we called the National People's Assembly on what is to be done. This what is to be done was a direct influence of Lenin's 1902 pamphlet about the Russian Revolution and movement, which only happened in 1917, as we all know. But ours was a generational mission. Yet, we emerged from the ANC youth wing, was a generational mission. Yes, we emerged from the ANC youth wing with a conviction that the Freedom Charter must be implemented if genuine decolonization is to take place. What is to be done was the question confronting us after the Marikana massacre and the complete closure of our program and agenda of nationalization and land expropriation without compensation by the mother body in its centenary congress in Mangaung. In addition, it was clear that the expulsion of the leaders of the ANC Youth League who led the program of nationalization and expropriation of land would not be won or would not find expression within the ANC. What is to be done was whether we fight through an NGO, and that's what we gathered to discuss when we gathered there. Do we form an NGO type of social movement which will form a united front of all working class forces? Or do we stay inside the ANC and continue to influence it and change it from within? Or do we form a political party to take on the ANC toe to toe? So a social movement would not take the ANC toe to toe in terms of the state, in terms of the resources, in terms of the spaces where the ANC is dominating. You can understand, we made an analysis that the reason why many social movements have been failing to undo the ANC, both within our communities but broader in the collective consciousness of our people, is because they are not taking it toe to toe. And the elections are very important. To govern in South Africa is very important. You can't underestimate it. The answer was, we have a generational mission. We cannot entrust it on anyone else. We further decided that, in actual fact, there is no saving the ANC. It is lost because, in the first place, it was always vulnerable because of its ideological basis in bourgeois nationalism. This is who we are, a generation that will not postpone our mission and are not ready to choose a political party over our people's liberation. So we wouldn't stay in the ANC and say, okay, we'll see it later. By the time the ANC gets transformed, we might be too old to challenge it. From the very beginning, in extensive consultations across the country, in all provinces across the country, that culminated in this National Assembly, it was clear that we must openly embrace socialism. We adopted our ideological foundation to draw from Marxist, Leninist, Fanonian schools of thought. And we decided to form a political party which embraced socialism, as I've indicated, and this ideological trilogy. We knew that we had never heard of such a combination, and this made us different and new, at least ideologically. Whilst Marx helps us to understand capitalism, Lenin helps us to understand revolution and party tools, including the state. But we go to Fanon to understand decolonization and white supremacy. We adopted a founding manifesto with 7 non-negotiable pillars. And these are, number 1, the expropriation of land without compensation for equal redistribution, nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic industries in the economy, building state capacity and government capacity, which will lead to abolishment of tenders. We talk about state-owned construction companies and all those things. Free quality education, healthcare, houses and sanitation, massive protected industrial development, basically to lead a program of developing the productive forces. We can't entrust it to some black bourgeoisie. We're going to lead it ourselves. Massive development of the African economy, advancing and advocating from a move from reconciliation to justice in the entire continent. Open, accountable, and corrupt-free government and society without fear of victimization by state agencies. This is our mission. And we are very certain of victory. The EFF emerged, as we know, contested in the elections. We won 1.1 million voters. We're the only people in the left of South African politics who can quantify our support to be way beyond 1 million. No one else can do that. Quantifiably, we have people who came out, bourgeois institutions were counting the votes, 1.1 million. We were not counting them. We have representation in all legislatures in 9 provinces, while official opposition in Northwest and Limpopo. That is the EFF. We've had to introduce it because there's been lots of misconceptions coming out of the academy, because we've never had an opportunity to introduce ourselves in the academy. As things stand, the EFF is the only political party in parliament in South Africa with an open pursuit of socialism. Parliament is really a site of struggle for us, but we are building an organization that must live beyond a single election, a single protest, a single mass spectacle act, like a Tahrir Square. We want to change the everyday experience of the people. Access to water, access to decent housing. We are not going to entrust those programs to anyone else. So in essence, we want to run the country. Now, we have managed to launch, when we arrived in our National People's Assembly, we managed to launch in 7 provinces of South Africa when we gathered last year to elect our first leadership. Now, I need to stop there for a moment because of 2 things. One is this question of democracy. We couldn't gather in Soweto when we gathered for the first time and elect a leadership. We didn't know each other. We were coming from different walks of life. There was a group from the Youth League. There was a group from all other parts of society, social movements, political parties that were there. We couldn't elect one another. So we decided on task teams, which we called working command teams. And we worked with a deadline to launch branches in each and every village, township, campus in South Africa, and then gather again to elect the leadership. We did exactly that. That was the first thing. The second thing was to participate in the elections. We didn't think we would win, but we knew that elections offer an important opportunity for ideological warfare. You need to inspire confidence that you can take the worst enemy of the people. You must demonstrate that you can take them toe to toe. When they campaign, you must campaign. Wherever they are in every village, you must be there. We're building a political party. We're not building a trade union movement. We're building a political party, which is going to implement these 7 non-negotiable pillars. And we are willing, we've said this from the beginning, in consultations with federations, in consultation with trade union movements, both prominent and small, that we're building a political party. And that we're going to expect, as time goes on, that we will inspire that there would be movements in all aspects of society, particularly in the workplace, that side of the struggle, there could emerge, because we were speaking with NUMSA, we were speaking with AMCU, we were speaking with people who were outside the Congress movement, we were speaking with everybody. But we knew that also we had never organized in the workplace. We did not have people who had organized in the workplace amongst us, at least in the prominent circles. What we know how to do is to organize communities. We had built the Youth League. It was bigger than the ANC. It had more branches than the ANC. And that's what we are doing now. We have presence in 90% of about 4,300 wards. They are being reconstructed at the moment. We have a presence, we have branches in each and every. We have just launched regional structures in the Eastern Cape as we speak, in all regions of the Eastern Cape. And when we arrived there, our people were embracing us. Now, if you think the EFF is youth, because it is led by Mbuyiseni or Julius Malema, again, you're making a mistake. We may have begun in the youth wing or in the youth movement of the ANC, but we are way beyond the ageist categorizations. We're a fully fledged political party that represents various ages of people, various age regimes. Even within the national leadership of the EFF, there are all types of people. And our meetings in recent times have been populated by old-aged people. Just in the last 8 months, we've spoken and had rallies in 6 provinces. And we speak to no less than 1,000 people within a ward. These are ward-based gatherings that culminate into bigger rallies. In all those rallies, Eastern Cape, PE, Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, Hazy View in Mpumalanga, Polokwane in Limpopo, Sasolburg in the Free State, we've not addressed less than 10,000 people. I don't know if that is not a mass movement. So we are a mass movement, and we are new. We can have time to speak and tease out the ideological leanings of the EFF, but as a point of departure, we're pursuing a socialist decolonization of the South African society. We're in Parliament. It's a site of struggle. We don't even, most of our energy is not even spent there. But it's a site of struggle. We're building an organization. We're going to contest in the 2016 elections. We're going to contest in every election in this country because our ambition is not to launch a big protest, win victory, and withdraw. It's to run the country. We can't entrust it to any bourgeois anymore. It's to run it ourselves and run and implement this program. That is why we want the country. Thank you very much.
Amandla. Phansi, capitalism, phansi. Forward to socialism, forward. Thank you very much. The title of my talk is The Spirit of Marikana and the Revival of the Workers' Movement in South Africa. John and the pamphlet for the meeting correctly state that Marikana massacre was a turning point in South African history. So I want to talk about the spirit of Marikana. What is the spirit of Marikana? It is a spectre haunting the South African ruling class. It is the spirit that is wafting around that God-forsaken mountain in Marikana. The spirit of workers shot dead for demanding a living wage. Workers demanding what they need and not the leftovers after the bosses have eaten. Workers saying it is better that you close down those mines than continue with the cheap labor system. It is the spirit of collective defiance, the spirit of do or die, striking against the advice of your own union, against the law, against your so-called government. It is spirit taking with their own hands their fate, struggling, trusting each other, forming workers' committees, and doing it for themselves. So I'll just say, clearly, the spirit of Marikana is a revolutionary spirit. And my talk is about why we should protect, develop, and take forward and protect the spirit. And, I don't want to theorize a lot, so I'm going to quote Zahara, the singer. There's a song called Tegwane. Yeah, Tegwane is a bird. So in the song, it's a praise song for the heroes of the struggle. Charlotte Maxeke, Helen Joseph, Steve Biko, Winnie Mandela, and so on, Robert Sobukwe, and so on and so forth. The opening lines in Xhosa, Umtu ongaziyo la yasuka khona, ufana nomntu ongaziyo la aya khona. It means if you don't know where you come from, you won't know. You are like the person who doesn't know where they are going. So my argument is that the spirit of Marikana is the same spirit which informed and drove the struggle against apartheid to victory. There was a workers' movement. You remember in the 80s, when all the organizations were banned, when everyone was in jail, COSATU and the unions took forward the struggle. So there was a workers' movement which was the driving force of our struggle against Marikana. And when I look at that movement, where every NGO, every student organization, every women's group would go to the COSATU local to get guidance, to get strength, to get a way forward, that was when the workers were in the driving seat. Even, I nearly said petty bourgeois, even leaders like the late Dr. Ntato Motlana, Reverend Alan Busak, they said it with their own mouths. There must be working class leadership because the workers had defined themselves as a world historical changer of history. Now, that working class, that was driven by politics which I find to be similar to the spirit of Marikana, where the rank and file counted, where leaders were controlled on the ground, where there was defiance, where it didn't matter what the law said, the Labour Relations Act, workers just went on strike. Where, in fact, leaders like Moses Mayekiso, he was both leader of NUMSA at that time, Mau, and also the leader of the Civic in Alexander. There was a unity of labor and community struggles. So, but this movement, because, you know, the bosses, the ruling class, they're not stupid. They realized that even though the apartheid regime would arrest that leader, would ban that organization, the struggle still moved on. So they realized that their problem was a movement, and they wanted to stop, to undermine and kill that movement, the movement of the working class. And then, how do you kill a movement? They went for its heart, and that heart is that spirit which I call the progressive working class tradition, which today we can call the spirit of Marikana. Suddenly, instead of the rank and file driving their own struggle, something called an eminent people's group was called in to speak on our behalf. Suddenly, Nelson Mandela was the big leader who's going to lead us into freedom, and not those workers in Tembelihle, in Gugulethu. Suddenly, the leaders were telling us what to do and not us telling them what to do. Suddenly, Oppenheimer, Bobby Gottsell, the bosses, were called social partners. Suddenly, the economy of the bosses, which the oppressors was called, it's our economy. When you strike, don't disrupt the economy. When you strike, give the bosses 6 months allowance notice so that they organize their things. So, that was not the spirit of Marikana. That was not working class politics. That was bosses' politics taken from the bosses and put inside the workers' movement. And when the politics of the bosses is put inside our movement, it becomes the politics of class collaboration. The attempt to find a balance between the interests of the workers and the interests of the bosses. The imagination that you can have a win-win outcome between exploiter and exploited. It's not the spirit of Marikana. It's the spirit of Mandela of reconciliation. And it led us down the garden path. That is why we're here today. So, comrades, colleagues, and friends, the way forward is clear. It's clear. We have to look back, look at the spirit of Marikana, that progressive tradition. We have to look at what is happening now. Because those workers on the mountain, for 1 minute, for a short while, they became the true vanguard of the workers' struggle. Not only in South Africa, but throughout the world. I'm telling you, only last week, when they issued this Falam Commission report, which I think we should talk about a bit later, I got a call from Slovenia. You know, we want to know what's going on with the Falam Commission. The eyes of the workers everywhere in the world are looking, they're interested. It is not only the NUMSA movement, it's very important, not only EFF is very important, but it's what Marikana means to millions and millions of ordinary working class people and their supporters. I think all of us here, we support the working class. So the way forward is clear. We have to protect and develop that spirit. It means we have to fight against the politics of the bosses. We have to fight against what some writers call the political economy of capitalism, individualism, competition, division, fragmentation. You know, during, when okay, you see now, this is the thing now, comrade, you speak like the ANC when they were taking our movement. Because the reason why we supported the ANC at the time, you know, the ANC, Mandela was in jail, Mbeki was carrying the bags of Thabo Mbeki, of Oliver Tambo in the UN. You know, it was a struggle on the ground of the workers. But then the ANC came and said, we have a method and a way of getting rid of the government of the Boers. We will take power, okay? So they're talking about power. They're talking about wealth, which is what the EFF is doing very good. Whereas, you know, in COSATU, you know, before that for SATU, there was no talking about power. So we thought, okay, the ANC is talking about power, we are going to follow it, okay? Yeah, so that is why AF is getting, you know, support, because people want power. They want to know, how can we get the wealth back? They want the road of struggle. Now, I think, I support the United Front, but I think that is what is missing. The United Front is not talking about power, okay? Yeah, so it's not talking about how we're going to distribute the wealth, how we're going to take the mines, nationalize. Let's clap hands for EFF for wanting to nationalize the mines and take the wealth. Because that is what is wanted, comrades. That is the spirit of Marikana. So, just to conclude, therefore, I would say that if the EFF, because you can see now in Greece with Syriza, okay? So you take power. I mean, Syriza is doing a good thing, but you can see that there is a bit of wavering. Can you see? Take power on a socialist platform. Good, you say that. But don't rely on the party. Don't rely on the leader, okay? But rely on the masses. We have to go to the ground and mobilize. Let the workers control their own struggle, okay? Now, all the questions about, because I see now, you know, I read the book. It's a good book, actually. I was impressed, we said. There's a book on the EFF. It's a good book. Everyone must read it, The Coming Revolution, okay? But I can see the tendency to think that we can work out a program which will implement. Of course, you must have some kind of program. But in the 80s, no one sat down to write a program. The program emerged from workers moving forward, okay? So I think that that is the spirit of Marikana. It should infuse Ivan Jim in NUMSA. It should infuse Jonah Police in the United Front. It should infuse the EFF. Victory will come when ordinary workers themselves, they regain that confidence and they grab the destiny with their own hands and not look to a messiah or to one party, but they do it for themselves. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.